Stream.
Yep, just watching to see if it's gonna come this far, and I don't know.
I have lakefront property now.
We'll take a closer look at one of the factors behind all the flooding.
It's going to make it more difficult for rainwater to really penetrate into our soil.
Tornadoes and severe storms are pounding portions of the region.
Mother Nature does things to us and we're not in control.
How a flash drought is causing big problems for farmers in one part of the country.
This flash drought is so bad that it's really causing farmers to make concessions.
There's concerning news about the sea ice in the Arctic Ocean.
The Arctic, you can think of it a bit as the air conditioner of our climate system.
And you may benefit from the launch of a new weather satellite.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm Angela Brown. The situation remains dire in the upper Midwest as flooding continues. There is so much water, it's breaching levees, overflowing river banks, and even damaging a dam. Right now, though, that dam remains intact. There are no plans for mass evacuation. Water levels are starting to lower. The Rapid Dam in southern Minnesota partially failed Sunday night after debris piled up, forcing all that water to flow around it. Unfortunately, many communities look like this. Water as far as you can see, with boats really the only way to get around. This is Spencer in northern Iowa. One person died here when his truck was swept away by the flood waters. People in Smithland, Iowa were urged to evacuate after a levee on the Sioux River failed. It was just one of several cases where water overflowed that levee. The view from above right here shows you just how much water this community is facing, but so far, there are no reports of additional injuries. The 45 residents of the nearby town of Rodney were also urged to evacuate on Tuesday. Water is already covering many roads. You can see it right here, and the flooding is not over yet. Katrina Markle has more.
I have lakefront property now.
Ray Thomas has a front row seat to the flooding. He says authorities knocked on doors in Rodney around 3:30 Tuesday morning. Neighbors near the levee left right away. A few hours later, he watched as the levee broke. He and his wife are ready if they need to leave.
We have all our to-go stuff is in the vehicles.
2 miles to the south of Rodney, Tony Christofferson watched as the water flowed near his home about 10 a.m., flooding a field of beans. He's hoping his family won't have to evacuate.
Yep, just watching to see if it's gonna come this far, and I don't know.
There was no power in the Rodney area on Tuesday afternoon, but Ray and Tony have generators to keep the air conditioning running in the heat. Menominee County roads employees told us the levee breach measured about 60 feet. Along the Missouri River near the Decatur Bridge, a mobile home park is underwater on the Iowa side as the river tops its banks.
And days of relentless rainfall is one of the causes of all of this flooding, but there are other factors at play as well, including the condition of the soil. Meteorologist Darren Leeds explains.
We've been running a little bit of a rainfall deficit over about the last month and a half or so, and our soil's really starting to dry out here across the region, and that's going to make it more difficult for rainwater to really penetrate into our soil and become absorbed. And that's when we classify it as hydrophobic soil, which means it's actually going to start to repel the water rather than absorb it and let it kind of soak down into the subsurface area. And that can lead to the water running off. It's going to seek its lowest point, and that can also start to increase the severity and likelihood of flooding, flash flooding events, as this water is probably going to work its way into storm drains and then eventually into streams and river basins here in central Illinois. But even a small amount of rain, with just how dry things have been, can lead to that soil being classified as hydrophobic.
And as if the flooding wasn't enough, Iowa saw at least one tornado and many funnel clouds on Tuesday. A viewer capturing this one not far from Cedar Rapids. It was fairly weak, though, and did not last very long. It reportedly damaged a road, trees, power lines, and also some crops as well. Early Tuesday, a storm system moved across the Great Lakes region, but before it arrived, massive shelf clouds hung over the sky. Viewers in Indiana, Michigan, Ohio submitted dozens of photos and videos. These clouds are often a sign that severe weather is on the way, and in this case, it was. We have reports starting with Emily Matasic in northeastern Wisconsin.
While the wind toppled trees and took out power lines during the early morning storm, it was the water that caused the most amount of damage.
The water's pretty powerful, and there was a lot of it this morning.
This is County Highway U in Door County, where it meets Rosewood Road.
Over the night, they got 5 inches plus of rain, and everything washed out.
This gaping hole is about 20 feet wide and 12 feet deep. This 6-foot wide culvert failed under intense water pressure. The road unstable and continuing to collapse. This gaping hole is about 20 feet wide and 12 feet deep. This 6-foot wide culvert failed under intense water pressure. The road unstable and continuing to collapse.
Mother Nature does things to us and we're not in control. The culverts weren't up to the job that we had with the tremendous amount of rain that fell in just a couple hours.
Once again, severe storms have left their mark on West Michigan, bringing down trees and power lines. Cleanup has been never-ending for tree and power companies this season.
We were swamped from the first tornado, and then we were just catching up with that and about to resume our regular list of people we were going to serve, and then the second tornado hit.
Multiple rounds of storms have pushed trees to their limit.
I think the idea that things are cracking and getting beat up during the tornadoes and stuff like this are, taking a toll on the trees, weakening them.
The latest round of storms packed a punch with 70-mile-per-hour winds recorded in West Michigan. These storms brought down lots of trees, and the result is a lot of power outages.
More than 100 million people are at risk of severe storms today. The highest risk, 2 out of 5, are in the 3 areas you see right here in yellow. One is from Kentucky to the mid-Atlantic, the second across Arkansas and Mississippi, and the third is in the plains. Of course, the heat is still very much a factor in many parts of the country. 58 million people are facing heat, 1 of 3 heat alerts, and excessive heat warnings are up for parts of Oklahoma, where temperatures could top 103 degrees. But as you can see, heat advisories stretch all the way to Florida and even include parts of the mid-Atlantic. And this morning, the National Hurricane Center is watching a second disturbance. Right now is off the coast of Africa. It has a 30% chance of developing into a storm over the next week. They're also watching a disturbance near Venezuela. We first told you about this yesterday. Now that has a 20% chance of turning into a storm, but right now it's not a threat to the U.S. One factor to consider when it comes to tropical development is the Sahara Dust. Meteorologist Chris Suchan explains what it is, how it forms, and how it can impact storms in the tropics.
It is Sahara Dust season in the Atlantic, and there's a massive kick of it moving west. I'm meteorologist Chris Suchan to explain its impact and how it develops. It originates over Africa, the Saharan Desert, about 3.5 million square miles of desert that develops a large temperature range to the rainforest to the south. This creates a kick of wind called the African Easterly Jet that will loft the dust in the sand about 1 to over 2 miles into the atmosphere. It spreads across the Atlantic. Back part of June through July, it slows down hurricane development as you cut off that tropical moisture and warmth. You introduce this warm, dry layer of air with the dust and sand, and that it really will choke off storm development. It also has reflective properties to the sun's energy, which can act as a cooling agent for the surface temperature of the ocean. Meantime, it has fertilizing properties as well. Phosphorus, nitrogen, iron, organic matter that can help out the Amazon rainforest. It could also help out algae blooms and red tides as well. So it's not all good. And it can create allergy symptoms for those that are sensitive to some of the dust particulates that do settle from about 2 miles up to the surface here. Those with asthma, cardiovascular disease could feel the impacts from Saharan dust. We're in the thick of it here right through July.
On Tuesday, a SpaceX Falcon rocket blasted off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, carrying a special weather satellite. It's called GOES-U satellite. NOAA says it's the Western Hemisphere's most sophisticated weather observing and environmental monitoring system. Officials say the satellite will give meteorologists a better ability to provide advanced weather forecasts and also warnings. It could also improve detection and monitoring of space weather. For the most up-to-date weather information, be sure to follow us on social media. Just search the National Weather Desk. And coming up on the National Weather Desk, we'll get a behind-the-scenes look at NASA's mission to better understand how clouds in the sun are impacting melting Arctic sea ice. And we'll find out how drought in Central Virginia is impacting local farmers.
I'm meteorologist Charlie Lopresti with Look at the Northeast. The heat is building in the Northeast today. We'll get a touch of humidity returning as well. 80s and low 90s will be common with a lot of sunshine. We actually had a weak warm front move through last night. And notice there's the chance for an isolated shower, but most of the day will be bright. That's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, a little area of low pressure tracking along that same front is going to bring a steady rain to the area, and that's overnight tonight and into early Thursday morning. Look for developing sun on Thursday with highs in the 70s and 80s.
I'm meteorologist Jasmine Lomax with a look at the mid-Atlantic region. As we head into the afternoon, our next frontal system will start to move in, leading to showers and storms. There could even be some strong, even severe storms as we head into the evening and the night, but a lot of the rain does taper by Thursday morning. Temperatures will be hot, reaching the 70s, 80s, and 90s this afternoon, but overnight expect a refreshing cool down as temperatures drop to the 60s and the 70s.
I'm meteorologist Charlotte Carl. Here is a look at your afternoon highs today. We have the upper 90s into the triple digits. Birmingham, Atlanta getting very close, and then Raleigh forecasted to hit the triple digits. Everywhere else, we're looking at the upper 80s and low 90s. Hour by hour forecast. We're expecting some sea breeze showers to start a little bit earlier in the day for the west coast of Florida, and then those will make their way over to the east coast. Also, we'll see some development along other areas of the Gulf Coast and South Georgia and the Carolinas.
The National Weather Desk.
In California, wildfires burning near the town of Paradise, which was destroyed by the Camp Fire just 6 years ago. The so-called Apache fire is now 40% contained. Cal Fire says at least 2 structures have been destroyed and 1 firefighter injured. Hannah Gutierrez has more.
People in multiple parts of Palermo and Oroville evacuated their homes after the fire tore through a section of Butte County. Crews began direct force against the fire using bulldozers, hose lays, and overhead equipment. 2 evacuees who wanted to remain anonymous talking about their up-close encounter with the fire and crews.
It was probably 300 yards from our house,
and it jumped.
Then it started going the other way, and it jumped, and it went through the whole valley right behind our house. When I walked outside, as soon as it started, I looked up, and the spotter plane is directly over our house. I go, okay, this ain't good.
On Tuesday, CAL FIRE said there had been no reported injuries to civilians, but 1 minor injury to a firefighter. They continued to remind residents to be prepared for a busy fire season.
Northern California is ready for fire, especially down here in the lower elevations. So we encourage all residents to be vigilant and to use caution when they're recreating outdoors, as well as working outdoors.
The Apache fire serves as a reminder of the importance of preparing for wildfires and following evacuation orders.
When they say go, flee. Yeah. You got to go because your access in and out could be limited and you may be stuck.
As we were trying to go, we were realizing that we're kind of in their way. We had to get our vehicles out of the way, and they were using our property to get access to a section of the fire. You need to allow them to do their job. Yeah. So we thought, let's just get out of here.
Yeah. It's a reality check. Just got to be prepared. That's all I know.
Farmers in Central Virginia have been dealing with something called a flash drought. A flash drought is severe and takes place over a relatively short period of time. Meteorologist Will Stafford looks at how farmers are dealing with this problem.
You can hear it in the ground itself. The lack of rainfall has really started to impact local farms. Glenn Dye bought this farm back in 2018 and specializes mainly in corn and soybeans. But this year's crop is getting trickier to harvest.
I pushed and tried to plant to catch a little bit of soil moisture that I had. Well, if it's not enough, it'll swell the bean. So So now that bean is swelled and it's not going to germinate.
We've seen a flash drought from the lack of rain, along with hotter temperatures and windy conditions that are making things worse. Dye says he's taken some steps to remedy the problem as best as he can. The corn and soybean fields now also have a rye cover crop.
The ground shaded, so that's keeping that moisture there. It's also shading out weeds that are trying to draw moisture to grow as well. So, it's it's keeping that down.
Bruce Jones is the extension agent for Appomattox County. He says it's not just grain and plant farmers feeling the effects of this very dry weather.
But it's also affecting our livestock producers as well as our homeowners and citizens.
And with no rain on the horizon, Dye is planning for the worst, but hoping for the best. This flash drought is so bad that it's really causing farmers to make concessions. This entire field is Glenn's, but he's unable to use it because the ground is so dry he can't get a seed down far enough into the ground. That is, at least until it rains.
And check out this photo of what looks to be a fat rainbow. This is actually called a glory. They are pretty rare to see as it takes a special set of circumstances to even form. Meteorologist Mitchell Combs explains.
This sight is caused by sunlight and very rarely moonlight interacting with tiny ice crystals and water droplets in the clouds. For the glory to materialize, the ice crystals and water droplets must fall within a specific size range, 10 to 30 micrometers in diameter. If they're any larger or smaller, the glory will not appear. When sunlight encounters the water droplets or ice crystals in the atmosphere, it undergoes diffraction through Mie scattering, resulting in interference patterns that form the signature rings of the glory. The innermost ring appears blue, followed by a series of alternating bright and dark rings that gradually transition to red on the outermost ring. The observed brightness of the glory's rings are a direct result of constructive and destructive interference. This diagram below shows how this interference works. We have our originating sunlight, which then is diffracted into these blue and red wavelengths. And the white line in between is the resultant wave, or essentially what our eye will see visually with the glory. When we have the white line at its highest and lowest points, that indicates constructive interference, or where the glory will appear at its brightest. The opposite is true when we have our white wave closest to that green line in the center. That indicates destructive interference, or where the glory will appear its darkest.
Summer sea ice in the Arctic has seen sharp declines over the last few decades. The downward trend impacts weather and climate around the world as sea level rises and also flooding. Meteorologist Jen Warner looks at how NASA's Arc-6 mission is helping to better understand the loss of sea ice.
750 miles north of the Arctic Circle, NASA's Langley Research Center has a team of climate scientists, instrument operators, and flight crews conducting groundbreaking research. Arc-6 is the latest airborne campaign tasked with tracking the evolution of summertime sea ice melt in the Arctic and how cloud particles interact with this melting process. Patrick Taylor is the deputy science lead from NASA's Langley Research Center. He was able to discuss this mission with us virtually from the Arctic Circle.
So clouds have two impacts on sea ice. They can help slow down sea ice if they reflect more sunlight, which they do. But they can also accelerate sea ice melt by heating the surface through what we call terrestrial or long-wave radiation that actually raises the temperature of the sea ice and can accelerate melt.
Arctic sea ice is integral in the Earth's overall climate system. When the ice melts, it affects the globe in many ways.
So the sea ice, the Arctic, you can think of it a bit as the air conditioner of our climate system.
Sea levels in coastal communities across the world, including the Carolinas, are ultimately impacted by sea ice in the Arctic. This sea ice can also alter large-scale weather patterns, adding to the potential for more extreme weather. The Arc-6 research campaign, with 2 NASA aircraft, also aims to improve satellite imagery of the Arctic from space.
Interpreting satellite images from space in the Arctic is really challenging because you have bright clouds over very bright sea ice, so it's hard to tell them apart.
Taylor says learning how to better interpret these satellite images will help researchers in the long term. Each day the Arc-6 team flies over the sea ice, it's vastly different than the day before. The link between weather patterns and climate change is a young science. Adding these pieces to the puzzle in understanding how a warming climate changes Earth's systems will go a long way in comprehending what's in store for Earth's future.
And a new study says the Antarctic ice sheet is melting in a way that may have made previous sea level rise projections inaccurate. The British Antarctic Survey says warm ocean water is getting beneath the ice sheet, causing it to float. The research published Tuesday says this could cause the ice to melt much faster and gradually raise ocean temperatures. And time now for a short break, but first let's take flight over Van Hill, Tennessee.
Good Wednesday morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Andrew Buck-Michael. The rain continuing to work its way towards the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes for the day today. Behind it, we're starting to heat back into the 90s in Lincoln and Wichita there, but rain moves back in tomorrow from the west while we're dealing with more sunshine across the Great Lakes in the Ohio Valley for your Thursday. Friday, the storms continue to slowly drift their way across the central part of the Midwest. And behind that, it's really heating up. Look at that. Wichita up to 100.
Well, good Wednesday morning to you. I'm meteorologist Chris Suchan. Look at our forecast today across the region, and we have the heat, the humidity across Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. The chance for a couple storms, a couple of which could have some wind gusts and some hail dropping south. Otherwise, Thursday, we have the mostly to partly sunny skies, not much on rain chances. And then looking ahead to your weekend, next weather maker is going to be our first real big kick of Sahara Dust moving in Saturday, Sunday, and through much of 4th of July week.
Good morning. I'm meteorologist Rebecca Stevenson. Here's what's happening across the West. And again, another day of excessive heat across California and Arizona. We're starting to cool down a little bit in the Pacific Northwest. Temperatures dropping just below normal. But this big ridge of high pressure holding on to the heat, but also allowing quite a bit of monsoonal moisture to bring the threat of flash flooding, especially around Tucson, and working their way into New Mexico around burn scars. Places to watch carefully. That's the scene from here.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
As we get closer to the July 4th holiday, meteorologist Allison Guttleberg looks at the potential risk of fireworks and wildfires.
When you think of the 4th of July, it's impossible not to think of fireworks. The light displays can be beautiful, but their danger is also real. It led Portland to ban fireworks in 2022.
Two very significant tragic events that led up to this ordinance. One was 2017, the Eagle Creek fire, where 48,000 acres were burned just by the use of a single firework.
The year the ban went into effect, fires caused by fireworks dropped by 33%.
2021, we had, throughout the fireworks season, we had 307 fires, 15 fireworks caused fires during that season. Fireworks season 2022, we had 224 fires, 10 firework caused fires. Last year, in the fire season, we had 336 fires, 46 were determined to be caused by fireworks.
And if you're looking for more great weather content, be sure to check us out on social media. Just search the National Weather Desk. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Angela Brown. Make it a great Wednesday, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.